What is up, you guys? We are back again with a great movie today, and allow me to start with a little bit of an exposition. The Europa 1 mission was the first attempt to send men and women into deep space. A privately sponsored mission of 6 astronauts is launched to Europa, a moon orbiting Jupiter, in search of potential life support systems. For 6 months, the world watched every moment. Samantha, CEO of Europa Ventures, narrates the story of the Europa 1 mission. The movie begins showing the recordings of the Europa 1 crew as they go through their day in their shuttle. Suddenly, connections to Earth are cut due to a solar storm, and they're unable to communicate with Mission Control. Once communications were lost, Samantha was called into Mission Control, and they were hoping that it was just a transmission problem, but by the time she got there, it had already been 15 hours since their last communication. Samantha displays the last images that they received from the crew. The ship had already traveled further than anyone has ever been, and the burning question of what happened to the crew and the shuttle has been living in everybody's mind since. After 6 months and with thousands of newly declassified images, Europa 1 can finally complete its story now. About 6 months ago, it was the day of the launch and everybody was excited. Samantha is leading the panel that's responsible for answering the press's questions, and the shuttle is prepared and ready for takeoff. Once the shuttle lifts off and leaves the Earth's stratosphere, the crew reports that they're officially underway to Jupiter. After they settle into their new living situation, James starts making a home video for his son, and he goes around introducing everyone and taping a tour of the shuttle. Live feeds of the shuttle are continuously being sent to Earth, when the crew members eat, when they exercise, even when they converse about random stuff. And it's already been 6 months since they started their voyage, and the crew members gather to celebrate. Later on, while everybody was going about their business, a solar storm hits the ship, knocking out communications with Mission Control. Andre and James go out to repair the system, but an accident rips Andre's suit, and James pulls back Andre inside the ship, but his oxygen levels were already too low. While the rest of the crew pull back James inside the ship, Andre observes that James's suit has been covered in hydrazine and cannot enter the airlock since doing so would contaminate the entire ship. He tries to save James by removing his suit, but the lack of oxygen causes him to pass out. James shoves Andre into the airlock, knowing that he has no chance of surviving, and he launches himself outside the spacecraft, and stranded in space, James finally says his goodbyes and passes away. The crew gather together and mourn the loss that they just experienced, and they're now unsure about continuing forward with the mission. In the shuttle, everyone is doubtful whether people on Earth still know if they're alive or not. William asks Rosa whether they're doing the right thing by continuing the mission, and she tells him that they are. In another part of the ship, Kaida is sitting next to Andre, and she's concerned that he hasn't spoken to her in weeks ever since the incident. But everyone on the ship has slowly started to lose morale, and they also started isolating themselves. William and Daniel talk to Andre about his recovery, and they're now very close to Jupiter, and they might soon depart the ship and head down. Daniel is concerned about leaving Andre in the orbiter while they depart, so they decide to take him with them. William and Rosa prepare to fly the ship to their destination, and all systems online were showing the green light to continue their descent. After experiencing a little bit of turbulence, they manage to land on the planet's surface. Everyone applauds with excitement. The surface temperature in the area they landed in was holding stable at 0 degrees, but unfortunately, they landed 100 meters away from their marked spot. And they realized that drilling the surface and conducting their research was going to be much more difficult than they thought. And after an extensive discussion, they decide to deploy the drill. And a few minutes after it was deployed, they feel the shuttle shake a bit. And as the time goes on, the quakes start to get much more stronger and more frequent. While everyone was analyzing the quakes, Andre takes his camera and starts filming outside through the small window. He then goes down to the control center and tells the crew that he'd seen something outside. And he tells them that it was a light source outside the ship about 100 meters away. Later, Daniel speaks to Andre privately and tells him that he needs to get some rest, but Andre refuses, saying that he's not going to do it until he finds out what's out there. He also refuses to take any sleeping pills because he wants to stay alert and make more findings. In the control room, everyone is working on their assignment when suddenly they hear something and realize that they've broken through the surface and reached the water. They turn on the microphone and cameras to see what's under the surface, and they move the probe to their target while grabbing samples on their way. All of a sudden, they register an increase in radiation, so they had to adjust the course of the probe in order to get clearer images. And suddenly, something bright slams into the probe and the crew loses all control over it. Katya suggests that she walks 100 meters to the target zone and collects samples, but the others are skeptical about the idea because of the radiation. Later, as Andre and Katya were playing chess, he asks her what she would do if she went out there and found nothing. William thinks that even if they find nothing, in effect, it's actually some kind of discovery. But Katya is sure that there's something out there. The crew members then all gather together and argue on how to proceed, and they vote on what to do, and Katya wins the vote to go and explore. After dressing up in a protective suit, Katya was ready to make her journey. She reaches the target zone and sets up, and she takes her first sample and sends the data back to the ship. After staying there for a couple of hours and collecting her samples, William tells her to come back. She sends them her last sample, which they found contained unicellular organisms. Katya then decides to examine a blue light she spots in a distance. As she gets closer to the light, she realizes that the ice was too thick, but before she could do anything, she slips through the ice and disappears. Before cutting out, her head-mounted camera broadcasts her final moments as the blue bioluminescent light reflects in her eyes. The crew decide the potential of a complex life form under the ice, but Rosa wants to make sure and wants more information. But even though Rosa wanted more info, Andre did not think that the area was stable enough for them to stay. He tells them that they need to leave now, and the team agrees to head out when the next launching window opens. The crew ready themselves for liftoff, but as they try to leave the surface, the engines malfunction. William then releases his seatbelt and dumps the water shielding to slow down the descent of the shuttle back to Europa's surface. Rosa and Daniel wake up first and go to check on Andre, and next they check on William, but it seems that he had died on impact. Rosa cries, knowing that William lost his life trying to save them, and eventually they realize that the ship had crashed at the originally intended landing area. The area, it seems, was much more active than the other data had suggested. The underwater vents had rendered the ice brittle and unstable, and William had dumped the water shielding, which had saved their lives, but it's left them vulnerable to radiation. The ship has now started to leak oxygen and is also starting to lose heat, and Andre thinks that they will freeze before they suffocate to death. He asks Daniel to check if the exterior light was working, and Daniel tells him that it wasn't looking good. Daniel informs them that the ice was cracking under the ship and that he could almost see the ice-water interface, and he was sure that they were going to be under the surface in a matter of hours. Rosa believes that the only shot that they have now at surviving is docking with the orbiter that they left in space and using its backup life support systems, but Andre thinks that he can get them to orbit if the propulsion system is still working, so he asks Rosa to come and help him. While they were working to prepare the ship, they feel the ground shaking underneath them, and eventually it breaks and their ship starts to sink. Andre then tells them that they only have 2 hours to fix the ship and it needs 2 people working on it. He then tells Rosa to stay inside and prep the engines, and Andre and Daniel leave the ship to try and mend some of the damages. And while the two are out there, Rosa prepares a recording of everything that happened on the ship, just in case if they don't make it, and if some future explorers manage to find the footage, and she connects the recorder to the comms panel. Andre goes outside first to make sure the ice is strong, and as Daniel goes down the ladder, the ice shakes and Daniel falls inside the ice. Andre tells Rosa that he's lost all visual contact with Daniel and that he's disappeared under the surface. Rosa then asks Andre if it was still possible to patch up the fuel line, but he tells her that it was impossible to do in time, but there was still something else that they could try. He tells her that the communication system was salvageable and that he could fix it if he takes parts from the life support systems. He asks her if she can prep the data, which she confirms that she could, and he informs her that the communication will go down when he removes the life support batteries. Just as the same blue light Katya observed approaches, Andre fixes the communication link to the orbiting mothership, but gets killed when he too falls through the ice. Just as the ice breaks and the ship starts to sink, Rosa reestablishes contact with Earth, and all the acquired photographs and data that's been retained since the solar system hit are transmitted to Earth through the mothership. Rosa uses the airlock to flood the shuttle in an effort to find the light source that they've been seeing since Kaita went out to investigate, and she notices a tentacled bioluminescent creature swimming toward her as the water reaches the cockpit before the video cuts out. And the movie ends as Samantha narrates how she received the call from the station, and by the time they made it to mission control, the servers were filled with images of the lost crew. They realized that the mission had been successful. As the video from a previous moment of the crew posting for the camera plays, Samantha confirms that the crew of Europa had discovered life surpassing all expectations. And this is how our movie today wraps up. I hope you guys enjoyed my recap. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and most of all, subscribe to my channel. I love you all so much, and I promise to see you on my next recap. Bye!